find it quite an honor to have the opportunity to take all this footage that people have so carefully written and directed and shot, and big crew has spent a lot of time and money to make, and then it goes into my hands and through my hands, and it's an honor. I take it
Sure.
seriously, and I try my hardest to do the best I can with the footage from my own instincts, but then also listen to what everybody else is hoping for, because we have to bring our own instincts to it, but then we have to say, okay, let's try it differently.
Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we chat with Amanda Pollack, editor on Palm Royale, The Americans, and many, many other wonderful shows. And she is joining us from London, and it's a late hour over there in London, so I appreciate your time. How are you?
Good, thank you, Jeff. Nice to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. And one of the things I read in your bio is you talked about how music and rhythm is intertwined with your editing. And I want you to unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that, and how did that instinct start for you?
I've always been musical. There's always been music in my family, a lot of playing instruments, singing, parties with music, and dancing. I mean, just dancing, all fun stuff, nothing professional.
Sure.
And I also used to love to just like when I would ride in the back of the car and music would play in my head, in my ears, and I would look at the world go by. I was making movies in my head, It was
Interesting.
oh, always been a massive music listener. It's a big part of my life, all kinds of eclectic. And I've played music. I played the flute when I was young and the piano. And then I took up some just amateur guitar later and
Wow.
sang. But I discovered when I'm editing, it's very much a rhythmic thing, putting it together. The way I edit, the way I pick the pieces and put them together, and then just it's a lot feeling where to cut, and it's an internal rhythm. So there's obviously cutting music, which I do a lot of, but I think there's also a lot of internal rhythm that just feels right and sounds right when you cut something. If the dialogue doesn't sound real or natural, it can just something's wrong with
Right.
the scene. So I think that there's the human internal rhythm, and and then the music when we need it, and we cut it and we add it. There's a lot of rhythm in editing.
And when you're cutting, and you're looking for that rhythm, is it, I guess it would depend on the scene. Are you looking for a
Yeah.
visual patter back and forth? Are you looking for rhythm in the dialogue, or I guess a bit of both?
It's kind of I mean, it's a visual, looking at the dailies. I usually will just look at the dailies, have the script, and try to cut together, line by line, what the script is, scene by scene. I'll just work on a scene at a time, whatever was shot the day before, and I'll just cut sort of individual scenes. But I guess I'm looking at the takes and what the visuals are that look good and feel good. And then as I stick it together, where to actually make that cut is a sort of just an instinct, an internal rhythm that has to do with more where it feels like it should cut. And then I just sort of hit my keyboard and cut it. I often stitch the scene together and don't really worry about the pacing. Then I watch it down and I start, trying to hone it and shape it, and maybe replace a take with a wide shot or a medium shot, or something like that. I don't focus too much on the ins and outs of the scenes individually, because once you stick it together with a scene that's coming in front and behind, you might have started with a close up, and the outgoing scene is a wide shot, and that works great. Or you might have a close up and it feels like I need a wide shot, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I but the rhythm is, oftentimes it might be cut slower than it needs to be. because I kind of love everything and I love the shots. And then as we shape it and hone it, certain scenes get paced up while others might be expanded,
Right.
depending on the emotion of it and the comedy that might be there where we're going a bit faster. So it's really a combing process as well. I never quite get the pace that I want, that is right until we've gone through it multiple times.
Have you ever had a time where an edit maybe technically didn't work as well as you would like? Maybe there was a continuity issue or something like that, but emotionally and performance-wise it worked. And so
Yeah.
has that ever happened? And do you lean more into the performance versus the technical side?
I really do. Yeah. I mean, I've cut scenes together where you cross the line and and it would be technically wrong, but emotionally it jars you in a place that you want to be that would helps with the emotion and the story and the characters.
You're,
So,
you're talking about jumping axis, purposely going like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you can't really do that regularly,
right.
but maybe during a scene where there's a real change in something, you can get away with it. I mean, I've come from a school of editing mentors that were kind of the school where you go for performance, you go for story, you go for what you need to tell in terms of the story and the performance, and don't worry too much about technical stuff, matching and all of that. Obviously, if somebody has a cigarette up in one shot and then it's completely not, if there are certain things that you have to, or somebody's arm is up and then it's just suddenly down. Yeah, we have to work a little bit with that, but I find depending on where you're looking in the frame, you might be looking at somebody else. You can get away with things if you just have a little bit of movement coming out of a frame. You can get away with it not being there. The next time you come, sound can really help. Sometimes something that's off camera can help us with buying that we've changed positions. But I go for what the hope is of the performance, like you say, and of the storytelling. And don't worry too much about the technical stuff, well, unless it's like super distracting.
Right, right. What would be the motivation for you to cut in a more, I don't want to say non-traditional because let me put it this way. So, there is traditional editing where you're doing match action, shot, reverse shot, so forth. What would motivate you to do a stylized cut? So maybe you're cutting action or you're having jump cuts or you're doing something a little more unusual.
Mm,
What would motivate that choice?
interesting. Well, I mean, I'm working on a show right now in London called Councils, that will air on the BBC in the new year. And there's a scene where somebody's sneaking around and trying to find something, and another person's downstairs trying to distract the person in the house. So when we go back up, to try and kind of have both of those actions happening at once, we are jumping a little bit. The woman's in the room and we're jumping the searching a little bit because you don't need to see every single aspect of opening drawers and moving across the room. So I am doing some jumps within the places that she lands in to just get through some of the action of the looking, because we don't necessarily need to see every single action opening and closing. So I think that can help with just tension and moving us through when it feels like it's not just jump cuts aren't distracting us. It makes sense as to why we're doing it. Um, when I was working on that, I started just looking at other things with a lot of jumps. And there's a lot of ways to tell that story with really high speed moving around and telling the story. But you've got to plan on that and have a lot of time to cover many, many things. But that's one thing I can think of where we're jump cutting to sort of have the real time, the time element be in sync with what's going on downstairs as well, without having an audience have to watch a whole thing happen in real time.
And this would, of course, depend on the coverage that you have to work with. But I'm
Yeah.
wondering, has there been a moment, and if so, again, what would motivate that choice, where you as an editor decided not to show something? In other words, you have the choice of showing exactly what's going on in a scene, but maybe you linger on uh, a person's look or a fidgety hand or something that's maybe not the obvious choice, but it heightens the tension of the scene.
Hmm.
Anything like that ever happen? And so, why would you make that choice?
Well, we had a lot of moments in The Americans where I think we would slow it down. We would
You
slow it
you
down
mean
and
you're slowing the pacing down? You're purposely
slowing the
keeping.
pacing down. Yeah, I mean, looks. There's a scene with Carrie Russell where, a woman is basically going to make a decision to commit suicide because Carrie stares her down so hard, the Carrie's character, that the woman knows she's not going to survive. And we do it from a look, from
Hmm.
some very slow talking to each other, but really drawn out looks and pauses that create the tension. And in a way, the slower the scene is, the more tricky it is to build that balance of tension versus boredom. You know what I mean? Because if it's just a good, if it's really the right length, it can just be such a tense scene. But if you go that bit too far with the slowness, it can just be like, okay, all right, come on, I don't feel tense, I feel bored. So I think that's also kind of like an internal rhythm. And it's a collaborative effort. So I'm working with directors and producers, and we're watching it and we're talking about it, and the writers that have a story that they're trying to tell, and with the footage that we have. So in that final look from Carrie Russell's character wasn't quite as long as we maybe wanted it, even though she was like amazing at stillness with expression in her eyes. It was she's an incredible actor. But I would still like to do the trick of slowing it down, slowing that last beat down to maybe 10% so that I could extend it. And she was so still that slowing it down to 10%, you didn't really even feel it because it was such a still moment. And that gave us that pause that we needed to then cut to the other person and say, okay, I'm going to start taking my heart medicine and killing myself now. So I would say, those are challenging because still and quiet is sometimes harder to cut than something that's really fast and frenetic and action packed, where you have a lot of coverage and you can cut to a lot of things and it's just fun. You're just along for the ride and you can get away with a lot more not perfect, shots.
I want to flip over to the independent film side because we have a lot of young filmmakers who they're trying to make their first short or their first feature.
Yeah.
What would you as an editor suggest to a filmmaker? What tips would you give them to make sure they're getting what an editor would need on a first project they're doing? Maybe they're just not as experienced and they're starting out for the first time.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's an interesting question for an editor. Um, I mean, I think coverage is really helpful. Even if you think it's going to all play in a master, you might want to cut something down. You might want to cut out some time. So it's really helpful to get some coverage, close up. Ideally, you get a nice master and you have some coverage of mediums and close ups. You can do a lot of tricks now with punching a close up into a really close up. So um, I know maybe a director might just have an idea it's all going to play in masters, but it's a different story when you get in the cutting room. So sometimes, or you
Right.
might just you need to push things along. So I think it's helpful to get some kind of coverage. Um, Thinking about transitions, going in and out of scenes, what is going to be the scene that follows, because some movement is often helpful to get us in and out of things, or just thinking about that transition. If there's, I worked on a film recently. I cut a feature of a director, Chris Long, who was a director from The Americans, and the opening had some now there were certain scenes in it that in the script there was some narration, and Chris brilliantly recorded the narration by the actor so that when he shot the scene, he had an idea how it was going to be paced and what we needed in terms of the length of the shot. Because very oftentimes, one of the things that happens is if you don't record it and feel it and pace it, you don't actually get as much footage as you might need once you stick it all together. So I thought that was really smart. And he was in post-production. So he comes from that, he thinks about coverage but it was really cool how we had exactly what we needed to pace out this narration. And he started with the narration and then sort of built his shots around that partly. So those are some things I would think of. And also don't say cut too fast because often you want a really nice, juicy, long beat at the end of it. And you can always cut it, but you can't extend it if you don't have it.
Speaking of that, I know in the independent film world, a lot of times I've worked on some indie films and I find, like you said, someone cut too fast, and so you're looking for that moment, and so you'll find that moment after
Hmm.
they say cut, where an actor lets their guard down, or they do something interesting, or they give you that
Mm.
look that you really
Yeah.
want. Um, does that happen for you? Do you look at things, before and after what should be the shot to find
Yeah.
little
I
special
mean,
moments?
yeah, sometimes we'll just, if you want a reaction, you're not necessarily looking at exactly the place where they've given you that reaction.
Right,
Um, and all, especially with younger or less experienced actors that might give you a little bit more than you want in terms of the
right.
performance, and you just want to kind of calm it down, or you want a reaction that's not as big. Um, yeah, absolutely. You just look where you can find one.
Have you
I
ever,
actually I saw recently saw a screening of The Graduate, and the editor's daughter was there talking about it, and they were talking about how he in that last moment of The Graduate where they run and get on the bus,
right?
um, the camera was just rolling, and it rolled well beyond the moment that was supposed to be the last moment.
Yeah.
The actors are sitting on the back of the bus, and they're waiting for cut, and they're kind of looking around like, what is going on? When are they going to cut? It went on for quite a while. And that's actually the moment that was used as the final look, which works so well for the story because they've just run away together, and it's this like, is this really going to work? Like, did we make a mistake?
Right,
It has loaded with so much that actually works for the story, but it also really had to do with the actors just being like, when are they going to say cut and what should we do
right.
now?
Yeah,
So that's an interesting story in terms of running it.
that final moment changes the whole
I
ending
know.
of that film, that one little look, that's it's
It's true.
well, have you ever had to rebuild a scene in an edit in a way that wasn't the way it was intentionally shot? Maybe the director decides, you know what, this should be a funny moment, or this should be a tense moment, or maybe, once the cut's done, you see an
Yeah.
opportunity to change the dynamic of a scene, and then you have to rebuild it in a way. Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah. It happens all the time.
Can you give us an example?
Uh, well, I mean, when I worked on The Patient, which was the show that Joel Fields and Joe Weisberg wrote after The Americans, we had the pilot, which was, a beautiful episode. We were all really happy with it. It matched the script, it matched everything, and we turned it in, and the network really wanted something that was a little bit more of a thriller and a little
Hmm.
bit less of a slow burn for the first episode. I think a lot of networks, they want things to happen quite quickly now in the beginning because they want to just hook you in. So we really restructured that. We really took what was the final scene of that and started with it,
Oh,
with the
interesting.
action of it, and then worked backwards in telling the story that was this kind of lovely, slow character study that originally built to the big scary moment at the end. And we kind of turned it around and then put the scary moment at the beginning and built who our character was, and telling that story by flashbacks, by, moments so it was completely different structure than was originally planned with the opening pilot. And it kind of took some time to figure out what it should be because it wasn't really what everybody was planning on and had shot it to be. But we made something that worked and that we were all happy with. It just took
Interesting.
some time. Just took some time.
Well, what makes you decide to, I'm assuming you're dropping it, or maybe not. Do you use temp tracks or are you building some audio files as you go just to feel the rhythm of the scene?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about working digitally now is you can build so much good sound and
Yeah,
music, and you can try so many things. You can do so many visual effects a lot of us are expected to comp green screens and track
really?
things, and it's crazy. I mean, I started in film, and you'd have to wait 3 days just to get your dissolve back from the
Right.
lab or the fade out. And so now that stuff is just, whatever. You can do anything, you can do all that easy stuff, but you can also, we had a moment where we put like someone's face in the rear view mirror of a car, and assistants. I mean, I think if you're trying to be an assistant and coming up through post now, you do have to learn a lot of this stuff, like tracking and After Effects and Photoshop. It's really good to have that knowledge because there is an expectation that we're doing a lot more in the offline world than we used to when we were coming up in the film world. I mean, we still farm it out to visual effects houses, and we don't have to do anything final. But for storytelling, it's really, really, really helpful to be able to have that. And I've completely forgot what your question was.
Oh, well,
Forgive
no, 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 that's good. What I was going to circle back to is as you're as you're building, say, the sonic world,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
you're dropping in
Yeah.
some effects or some temp tracks or something like that. What would make you make the choice to let the sound do the heavy lifting in a scene and not so much the visuals?
Mm,
Maybe it's
hmm.
well, you know what I'm saying. You might be editing the picture and then you go, you know what? If we just let the
Yeah.
sound of the storm overwhelm the character,
Hmm.
maybe that'll work. Anything like that ever
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love sound, and generally I cut the dialogue pretty basically, and unless it's a music montage, I don't use any music when I'm putting it together. And then I watch the whole episode down or the whole film down, whatever it is, after many days and weeks, depending on how long the content is. And then I usually, after actually scene to scene, I'll hand it to my assistant and I'll ask them to put some atmos in there. If we're out in a park, add some birds, or the Americans was very cold, so we never wanted anything with Tweety birds. We wanted it to sound cold. So even in birds, I love crows because crows you can have in the winter and they just add like a bit of a tense quality, the Tweety summery birds. So in Palm Royale, which took place in Florida, we had loads of lovely birds and we had water because they were near the ocean. And so oftentimes that just does really help to build the world, a beautiful world like Palm Royale, where you're near Florida. And in the Americans, it was wind and it was crows and it was, really not even crickets at night because it was supposed to be taking place in DC in the wintertime. So that can really help tone a scene and hard effects, if a car is going to crash, it's going to be really helpful if you can sweeten all of that. Or if there's a fight, to add some real hits that sound good if somebody's getting, if you've got a fake fight. So I really love sound. I really respect good sound designers and editors and mixers and I love the mixes actually because it's really where all the work that you've done on the visuals and cutting all the visuals together sort of it just gets elevated, you just everything just gets juicier when you have a great sound job. And of course composers, I've got massive respect for composers, and often when I watch it down, that's where I'll see like, oh, we need some music here. It's
Right.
clear we need some score here. This would be a great place for a song. I've got pretty good instincts with music, and I've worked with people who also have very good instincts with music, but it can be really fun figuring out what the score should be and working with a great composer or a song that just works perfectly for a whole little section. And then of course mixing all of that.
Right.
It's a lot. It's as important as the picture. I mean, it's no less important than the picture. Of course, if you can't have just sound and music and no picture, because it wouldn't be a movie or a television show. But but it really does enhance everything when it's done well, like every department.
Sure, sure. Well, Amanda,
Yeah.
before we let you go, is there any way people can track what you're up to? Are you a social media person? Do you talk editing online on Instagram or anything?
I am on Instagram. It's AEP Editor, if anyone wants to follow me there. And I guess I'm not as social media out there as I should be or as I could be, but I'm an editor, I'm kind of behind the scenes. I'm a bit of a
Sure.
loner there behind the scenes doing my thing. But I recently joined British Film Editors. They invited me to join, and I am a part of American cinema editors as well. I'm in the union, Local 700. I've been doing this for a few years and I feel really lucky. It's really fun and it's challenging. It can be really challenging and I find it quite an honor to have the opportunity to take all this footage that people have so carefully written and directed and shot, and big crew has spent a lot of time and money to make, and then it goes into my hands and through my hands, and it's I take it, it's an honor. I take it
Sure.
seriously. And I try my hardest to do the best I can with the footage from my own instincts, but then also listen to what everybody else is hoping for, because we have to bring our own instincts to it, but then we have to say, okay, let's try it differently. You got an
Yeah.
idea? Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try it. And just be open to have my own mind at that point be changed and or just you know, going in a different direction. We've got to keep open and keep flexible to find what is the place that makes, all the creative people that need to be happy, happy. So it's challenging in the people world as well as the technical world. But it's fun and I feel really lucky because it is a lot of fun and it's quite satisfying to it's like we make these little worlds, collaboratively together. It's exciting.
Well, I can see it in your smile. You love what you do, and that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you. Your questions were great and it was really nice to talk to you.
Well, stay in touch. We'll chat again sometime, hopefully.
All right, great.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thanks
You
for the
take care.
time.
All right.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen Deepen.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.